Hello.
Hello.
Good to see
Howdy.
you.
And you?
Well, thank you. And I think it's been since the summer, or maybe the spring.
Yeah,
So
been a
that's
while.
good. Yeah. And you know Mark,
Sure.
and then Casey is joining us as well.
Hi, Casey.
Hi, how are you guys?
Very well.
Hey. I don't Mark, have you met Casey?
No, I don't think so.
Well, hello.
Now I have.
There you go. Exactly. Well, I've got this thing recorded and I sent a couple of talking points, notes, whatever. Um, and I sort of got this interest in going because there's some announcements out of VC Summer that hang on a second. Sorry. That VC Summer that Santee Cooper had reached basically an agreement uh, and they're supposed to announce this next week or so that they've got an agreement with Brookfield management to restart the nuclear facilities at VC Summer, and that Westinghouse, who started the project, failed, declared bankruptcy, was bought by Brookfield, has now been brought back in the picture again. So it's a I'm not sure it's a vicious circle, but it's a weird circle. So that all that is created, but I just wanted to, um, but I wanted to also, with all that going on, it sort of brought to our attention the efforts going on with other types of nuclear reactor technology that's out there that doesn't get a lot of play in South Carolina. And I'd hoped that Kim would give us a few minutes and maybe sort of tell us a little something about what's going on with Next and what has transpired since we last talked, which had a lot to do with various schools doing some other branches from the technology you've been creating there at Next. And anyway, I'm just trying to set it up so that Kim, if you would sort of, you feel like jumping in and sort of updating us a little bit about what's going on in the market and any projects that are memorable or noteworthy. Let me put it that way, not memorable because we still want them to be alive, but noteworthy. So take it away.
Well, for Next Lab and Natura, there are basically three big items for this year. Some of these may go back before we talked last time, but um, the president issued a few executive orders that have been important to our industry this year. One of them led to the Department of Energy's creation of a pilot program for advanced reactors. There was a solicitation from the DOE for participants in the pilot program, which will hopefully lead to, well, I believe the executive order in the pilot program says three critical reactors, advanced reactors, critical by July 4th of 2026.
Hmm.
I've not talked with anyone who is ready to bet their house that any of those projects will actually be critical by July 4th, but certainly the support from the federal government at the highest levels is welcome. And I think it will definitely help to accelerate several projects. So I believe 11 projects were selected from 10 companies. The MSR one at ACU from Natura is one of those projects. Um,
Yeah.
I believe we are to date still the only project of any advanced reactor that has a completed facility. Um, there are a handful, I think, four projects that have received a construction permit from the NRC. Um, two of those are Kairos projects, the Hermes 1 and 2 demonstration reactors. Um, one is ACU, the only liquid fueled molten salt reactor, the only university research reactor among these. And then I believe TerraPower has a project that has now received a construction permit. Um,
Okay.
the two Kairos reactors are not part of um, the pilot project selection, that group of 11. So they're in addition to these 11. Um, anyway, so being selected for that, I think just it doesn't come with any money. Um, it
Darn.
does come with sort of an alternative licensing pathway. So we have been proceeding through the NRC licensing pathway. Our construction permit was issued from the NRC. We have been working on the operating license application, which we will submit to the NRC. But this pilot project, I believe, allows for the Department of Energy to basically extend its umbrella to real estate that is not on national lab grounds. So maybe you're already familiar with the idea that the Department of Energy has its own licensing or authorization pathway for reactors that are at national labs. They don't have to go through the NRC.
Okay.
I believe this pilot project allows for the Department of Energy to, for these specific projects, to grant them operating approval, even though they're not at national labs. So it extends their sort of licensing pathway for these advanced reactor pilot projects. And so uh, ACU has, Natura ACU partnership has applied for that. And I think I just saw today um, the document that has been executed, signed by both parties, that allows for this project to proceed. The agreement between
Wow.
Natura and ACU and the Department of Energy under this pilot project, I believe that's what I saw that has been executed. So that now
Okay.
provides for this agreement that our construction permit authority, I think, transfers over from the NRC to the DOE, and then our operating permit license will then come from the DOE initially. And I think ultimately the plan is still to transfer that authority back over to the NRC at some point, maybe in 2 or 3 years, so that long term, the reactor at ACU will be operating under the NRC's authority. But this DOE pathway is sort of a fast track way
Right.
to get there.
Okay. That is good. That's good to hear because that was one of the questions I had is there going to be a light program, so to speak, to get things? And it sounds like the DOE is on a parallel path, but they're a little bit faster track.
I, I I think that's the case. I think DOE is even um, planning to use some of the NRC personnel to help do some of their evaluations. But yeah, I think a lot faster speed is one of the priorities. Of course,
Yes.
not at the expense of safety, but
Right.
but I think they just want to help the NRC do things a lot faster for these specific cases.
Well, it just seems to me that there's uh, two two types, if you will. There's the what I call the emerging technologies process, which is smaller, smarter, and uh, different than what I would call the larger, like the Westinghouse AP 1000s, which are what we see as the 3 Mile Island type of reactor. And so I just, I could see why those two can't fit in the same box. They got to have different pathways. That's my real layman's. Maybe somebody else has a take on that, but that's
Yeah, and
real layman's technology.
I think the executive orders refer to it as advanced reactors, but yeah, the idea is that these are not the traditional big
Mhm.
powerhouse reactors that the NRC is used to regulating. And because these are advanced, and a lot of the questions that come up are not questions that the NRC maybe has a lot of experience dealing with,
Right.
but DOE does have a lot of experience dealing with non-conventional small test type reactors. And so I don't know, maybe they are more used to addressing those kinds of questions. It's not really my area of
That's right.
expertise, the
Yeah.
licensing and stuff. So I'm sort of talking to you as an observer, but that's my impression.
Got it. And so there's a lot of movement then in that area. But do you anybody else want to ask a question? I'm going to shift it just a little bit.
Let me just throw out the other two things that are
Oh, okay.
on my
Sorry.
mind as far as things that have happened this year for Next Lab.
Wow.
Second thing from the Department of Energy is that we received in writing a commitment about the allocation of HALEU fuel from INL. And so that's something that we have had our eye on. We thought we had an
Mm.
agreement in place back in 2019. Things didn't happen for a few years, and that's been reaffirmed now. And so there's basically fuel with our name on it at INL that we will be able to use. Now, it's still in the form of metallic uranium, and that's not a form that we can use it. So there's still some discussion about how that's going to be converted into the form we need, which is uranium tetrafluoride. But is a big step to get our name on the fuel that we will use for this reactor. So, yeah, so that's something that we couldn't do by ourselves. We had to have the DOE help us with that, and we feel like we've taken a big step in that direction. And then the third thing is the salt, which we have always identified as 2,000 kilograms of FLIBE sitting at the Oak Ridge National Lab. It's been sitting there since the 60s. Nobody's wanted it. It's almost been thrown away. But it's what we need because it has not just the chemicals that we need, but it has the enriched lithium 7 that we need, 99.995% lithium 7 enrichment in that salt. And so again, same kind of process. We've been telling the DOE that we need it. We thought we had a commitment from them in 2019 to provide that salt, but then there was a long time where nobody really knew who owned the salt, who had the authority to give it to us. And then they finally decided they had to make it like a competitive open bid kind of thing. And anyway, they finally created a method to get rid of that salt and solicited people that wanted it, and we responded. And so I don't know exactly where we are. We don't have the salt yet, but I think I've even heard some people say we might get that as soon as the first quarter of next year. So anyway, I think that's a major accomplishment. Getting our name on that salt and then getting it shipped here would be huge for us. And so that's great. Another little minor thing that just made this whole project more real to me is for a couple of years we've had this building that I'm sitting in, which will house the reactor, but it's just a building, a shell almost as far as a reactor goes. It doesn't have any pieces of the reactor. But a couple of weeks ago, we had three semis show up with all the components for some hot cells that we will install in our building. And I actually helped physically push 60,000 pounds of lead bricks on various pallets from the middle of the truck back to the back of the truck where a forklift could get a hold of it and unload it. And so, yeah, having three semis show up with equipment that goes in the building to handle high radioactive samples, that definitely feels really real to me now. So
Wow.
that's another fun little development there.
Congrats. That's great.
So I have a question real fast, Kim. What do you think you could attribute? So it seems to me like I feel like in the first Trump administration, there was a lot of like unfilled positions in places like DOE. And then now we're coming, so it seems like in that 2019 timeframe where things were not really getting done, it might have been there just weren't the personnel there to be able to organize those processes. What would you attribute this like momentum, this new momentum? Do you think are there folks in those spots now? Or does it feel like the infrastructure exists? Did the infrastructure come in during the Biden administration? Or like what would you say is sort of shaking things loose in the DOE right now?
Okay, so I don't know each of you, and I don't want to offend anybody. Some of this gets into almost some political discussion, and so I try to stay away from those things. Um, my This is just Kim Pamplin. I'm not speaking for ACU or Natura.
Sure.
My perception from looking at the news is that the first Trump administration had some ideas for sort of what they wanted to do, but they were learning the ropes. Um, the Biden administration clearly had some other ideas for what they wanted to do, different agenda. That's fine. It's the will of the people, whatever. Um, my impression, again, personal impression, is that second Trump administration came in with that experience of the first administration and were able to learn from what they perceived they did wrong or could do better. And a lot of that was just in general getting things done. And so they came in with a plan, whether I agree with it or not, and they were very effective at getting stuff done in a very quick way. Get it done, get it done, get it done. Uh, Maybe realizing that their time is limited. I mean, no matter what, their time is limited, and so their impact is limited to whatever they can accomplish. I don't know, maybe the first couple of years.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
I mean, and so then when you add that just overall perspective, I think that applies to everything that I've seen from that administration. Um, but then you create within that this pro energy. Really, it's almost all pro energy except windmills and solar. Drill baby drill and nuclear.
Yeah.
That's not drill baby drill, but it's foot pedal to the metal with just go as fast as we can safely go. Um, so your question about were there positions that were unfilled? I don't know about that. We had the person whose office is known as NE1 here on our campus during the first administration, and that's I mean that's as high that's as high as we we need to go. Well, I mean that's the person that we needed to be talking to in the Department of Energy. He came, so he was here, and he had people under him, and he had the discussions that we needed to have, and like I said, we it resulted in the letter that we thought we needed. And what changed was, you know, all of those positions from him on up and probably several below him when the next administration came in, and they had a different
Sure.
interpretation of what that letter meant. And anyway, so um, yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's my perspective.
Yeah.
It kind of does, and so I probably should have just introduced myself before. I know George told you I'm Casey, but I'm a I'm a libertarian. I'm running for U.S. Senate from South Carolina, and
Okay.
so I have been just wanting to learn absolutely everything I can on all the different things that would come across the a senator's desk, as far as being in a regulatory role in Congress. And so when George said he was going to have this conversation with you, I like eagerly was like, yeah, I want to hear, I want to listen to.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
so I'm always curious about, if you think of it from the executive branch getting engaged, pushing things forward, and then, what's getting in the way, what's stopping that forward progress, and not in any way to cast aspersions on anybody politically, one side or the other, but
Sure.
just to kind of think about what does that process look like, and when we do see priorities changing through administrations, did we see that sort of ramp up come because the administration changes hands and they know they have a short period of time to get as much done as they possibly can in this
Yeah.
nuclear space. So
Yeah.
that's it. That's all I was curious about.
And I don't know, we might have another longer discussion at some point, but it has been interesting to me again as pretty much an outsider watching some people that are more well versed at this talk with lobbyists and with our elected officials and folks in Congress. I'm thinking of you from your perspective as a potential senator. So when we got the feedback from, I'll call them the bureaucrats in the DOE that decided they didn't want to honor that letter, or I mean, it's not that they said they didn't want to. What they said was, well, the university fuel program, which we've been operating for all of these reactors, 30 reactors or so around the country, university research reactors, they provide the fuel for all of those reactors. And we were told in that letter, yep, you're a university research reactor. We're going to provide fuel for you too. Well, so when it made it down to the people who had to make those decisions, they said, well, we don't provide that kind of fuel. This UF4 that we need, we don't, they don't handle that kind of fuel. So we don't have the authority to do that.
Mhm.
And then we don't have the funding to do that. And so there's been a lot of work with Natura lobbyists and ACU lobbyists to talk with our congressmen and senators. And like I said, we have other universities. Georgia Tech is one of our peer universities that's also working on this project, and so they're elected officials as well um, to
Wow.
to try and get language into legislation that takes those roadblocks away that those bureaucrats perceived that kept them from providing what we need. And whether it was those things or now it's this executive order that just sort of blows away everything. Look, this is the way you're going to make it happen. Okay,
Right.
fine. Whatever it is, let's get it done. I'm appreciative for folks like you that are um, willing to learn and help remove roadblocks to progress. That's what I like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's well,
absolutely.
from a libertarian perspective, that's what we're all about. So get the roadblocks out of the way so people can
Yeah.
prosper. So I'll stop talking now and listen because I know George has some questions about some
No,
advanced
yeah.
technologies.
Mark, you want to jump in or you got any thoughts or we move I just
Um, no, I mean, I guess it's really encouraging to hear that, not that I'm at all surprised because this is way in my wheelhouse that somebody's saying go get this done and people go get it done. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
usually how the world works. It's been in
Just
corporate
last
America.
week, I was at the Molten Salt Reactor Workshop, which is hosted by Oak Ridge National Lab. This was in
Oh,
Knoxville, Tennessee. And in that room, I think there were 325 people like me that are in some way involved or related to this overall work of molten salt reactor development. And I've been going to this workshop since probably 2018. And yeah, it's really exciting to see how things have changed. A few years ago, it was a lot of people with great ideas and PowerPoints, and now all over the place, there's real work being done and results being
hmm.
generated and progress being made, and still a few people with great ideas and PowerPoints, but it's interesting to
more
see the changes. Yeah.
more shipments. And when are you expecting now that you've seen the progress with like things being
Yeah.
delivered, the building to be sort of up and running? Like, has your time frame changed at all? Like, where's your time frame at?
Well, I tell you what, I almost got chills. It's about a month or two ago when At an internal meeting, our director was talking about our homecoming, which happened last month, where we have a an open house, and
Mm.
our building we stop all the work and we open up the building to anybody that comes by for this open house. And the thing that sent chills almost up and down my spine was he said, and this is probably the last year that we'll be able to have the building fully open for tours because
Oh.
Right.
next year at this time we may not have an operating critical reactor, but we will have work going on in that pit where the reactor is being assembled, and we probably won't be able to take people in there. And I thought, oh wow, that's that's a milestone. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So if you didn't get to go on the tour this year at homecoming, yeah, it's probably not going to happen for you
You
in
have
the
to
future.
probably get your PhD and go work for them
Yeah, that's right.
next.
It's a lot
So,
of fun.
tell me anything else, Mark?
No, I mean, well, I mean, that's just really good news. I'm glad
Yeah,
that
that's
we're moving forward with that. So I guess real quick, Kim. So from my perspective, what I see is, we have energy, right? We tried the sort of always on large reactor stuff, and then crazy people thought that you could do wind and solar, which just on paper was never going to work, right? Because almost all the power is factory power. It needs to be 24/7. And you can't substitute, always on power for, right? So that never made any sense to me. But now we have basically effectively the third market opening up with these small portable reactors that
Mhm.
may or may not be stackable. I'm still way up in the it's like I know scaling from the computer industry pretty well. I don't think it's gonna scale like that. I'm sorry. I mean, I hope it does, but also, yeah, I got real questions on that. But even just single reactors and small data centers or something, um, even if I don't necessarily like data centers, small factories, whatever. I think that's like a new, like I think this is a whole new landscape, and so your research is really introducing this new landscape where it's not just controlled by these big guys who are looking at these 35-year time frames to build a simple thing, or maybe it's not so simple, but it certainly seems simple at the delivery end, right? And now you guys are coming in and saying, we can innovate this, we can do these things. My understanding is most of this work's already happened in Japan. They have this sort of stuff. um, I don't know how true that is, that you see lots of things you may or
I'm
not.
aware of some claims coming out of China that they have a thorium molten salt reactor that's operating. I'm not sure about Japan, but go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they were advertising, it's been 10 years. They were advertising portable reactors. I don't know if they were molten salts. I think they were.
Okay,
I think they were more like what you put in a submarine, which by the way is way awesome technology. I don't know why we haven't been using that all this time, but we've had it for like 70 years.
sure.
Um, so do you see this? Is that how you see what your research is doing? Is sort of you're researching a new technology that opens up a new industry, or I just want to get your feel from the inside of what that looks like.
Is it opening up a new industry? Well, it's at least definitely a sub-industry. I guess a lot of people would call it all nuclear. It's all the same. It's all nuclear, but there's some significant differences. Um,
Yeah, size and
you,
scale,
you know,
the big difference.
the you said you're not all that excited about data centers, and I think that's an opinion that's shared by a lot of folks. But I think one thing that I think is undeniable is that the energy demands from those data centers are driving lots of capital into the
Oh yeah,
nuclear power industry.
Mhm.
And
yeah.
you see it all the way from, oh, even reopening one of the power plants at 3 Mile Island
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
get that thing online. I see lots of others that have been mothballed or they're near the end of their expected lifetime, and people are trying to figure out anything they can to extend those things because it's a whole lot easier to just keep one of them running than it is
Yeah.
to start from scratch. Everybody gets that. So all of those that can be extended or reopened, those are gonna be, and then there's still gonna be this huge demand, unmet demand. And how's it going to be met? And oh, by the way, maybe you get a kick out of this. 60 or 70 miles from here. They just last week had a ribbon cutting for a energy storage facility. So now that makes you think batteries, right? Nope, it's not batteries. This is basically a structure, a skeletal structure, a tower that allows them to lift heavy weights like big
Yeah.
concrete blocks.
Yep.
And so then that stores some energy. And then as you release it and it lets it come down, you can convert it into electricity again. And so, of course, out here with all the solar and wind, there are folks trying to find a way to store some of that energy. And
Right.
anyway, I got a kick out of that. But
That's
um,
funny. Yeah. Well, all the I don't know if you know this, Kim. All the lakes that would be good for pump and produce are bought up. They were bought up years ago. You
yeah,
cannot buy a sufficiently sized lake to do the pump it up and then run the turbines at
yeah,
night
yeah.
trick at all. They years and years they've been off the market. Yeah.
So, yeah, so what I think I see a lot of is there's clearly a market for more AI and there's a perceived demand for lots and lots more of that in our future. And that can only happen with lots more energy. And
Yeah.
so at least in the short term, we can get there by natural gas and the conventional power. But long term, I think everybody believes that there has to be more nuclear. And so the the dollars are out there in figures that I can't imagine. And it seems like, I mean, I get this nuclear news daily or whatever, and it seems like every day there's some new power purchase agreement or some new application license that's put in, or just I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it every day in my computer that things are
Wow.
so much
Yeah.
news happening so often, so big. Um, yeah,
So let
huge
me ask
demand.
you, sort of shift a little bit. I'm trying to think that we've talked about Copenhagen um, energy, Copenhagen,
Copenhagen Atomics.
yeah, atomics, that's it. And they, as I remember, they were able to produce about 43 kW, no, megawatts in a single. Give me, what are you looking at to produce your capacity out of one reactor at your, have you got a target or can you help me out with that?
Yeah, this reactor that's going to operate here at ACU, of course, is restricted by regulations, cannot produce electricity, and it cannot operate at higher than 1 megawatt. That's just sort of the general guidelines for a university research reactor. Um, my understanding is that the Natura Resources is already working on um, licensing a 100 megawatt reactor that they might
Wow.
put at places like they have an agreement in place with Texas A&M at their Rellis campus. A&M wants to have maybe 4 or 5 demonstration reactors there. Um, and Natura is also working on another, I think you would call this a commercial reactor. It's not to produce electricity so much, but in conjunction with Produced Water Consortium at Texas Tech University. They have some land out in far west Texas in the Permian Basin where they would like to take the produced water. So that's the water that comes up out of the ground when you pull a barrel of oil out, you pull out, I think it's 10 barrels of really, really salty water. And
Mm.
right now they just pump that back down in the ground.
Hmm.
So this produced water consortium is looking for ways to economically recover some pure water out of that to use for the millions and millions of Texans that every year use a bazillion gallons of water. And so Natura has an agreement with Texas Tech to provide a small nuclear reactor for that facility. So, in a sense, it would be, from their perspective, like a pilot scale reactor. So, it's going to be bigger than this MSR1 here at ACU, and it may not produce electricity for the grid, but it probably would produce some electricity for that produced water desalination project,
Right.
and it may also provide some heat for that project as well. Um, and
Mm.
so that's another incarnation of a commercial reactor, and I'm sure they're thinking about some other things that they haven't told me about.
So
Yeah.
the 100 megawatts, like, is that molten salt? Are they getting that out of a single? How are they doing that? That's a big.
Yeah, molten salt definitely. That's all Natura's working on, and a
Oh,
single reactor. I think that's what they're planning. Um, uh, Again,
It's
I,
so just
huge.
I
scale
I'm
size
not an
wise?
engineer, um, but I'm told that you could increase dramatically the power produced by a reactor like this, and you wouldn't have to increase it by 100 times size to get a
Okay,
hundred times the power out of
that
it.
makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know exactly what that scale is. I've seen some drawings where
Mm.
they have this is sort of back into the PowerPoint sort of level of presentation, but what I've seen is a series of reactors. I don't know. They have like a two, a four, and a eight maybe model where in a single structure they have two reactors. One of them's operating, the other one is going to come online when the one goes out. And then so they'll take that one out and replace that. So I guess in answer to your question, is the
Wow.
100 megawatt facility all coming from a single core, or
Right.
is that multiple cores? Maybe I don't know the answer to that at this
Okay.
point. And that even the answer to that may be different than what is the next reactor that they're going to put out there at Texas A&M. That very well could be a 100 megawatt single unit reactor. Um,
Hmm.
but
That's
I don't
data
know.
center size, right?
Yeah,
Like the way I see things unfolding is that the tech guys know full well what they're doing, unfortunately.
yeah.
Whether that's a good thing or not, you decide. I know some of these people, it's probably not a good thing. It's like they're going to scoop up all the large energy producers that they can because that's what they need, right? And then they're going to relegate everybody into some mid-market. You could say originally that mid-market stream was supposed to be solar and wind. I'm sure
Yeah.
guys like Al Gore were dumb enough to think something like that could work because they can't do basic arithmetic. But clearly something's changed, and they now think they can get away with this mad plan of theirs, for better or for worse. So yeah, that's actually interesting to me that because if you can get like 10 megawatts or something in a relatively small space, we're talking about all different industries all of a sudden, right? When
Yeah.
you're in the 1 to 2 range, you're limited. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's certainly a big market there. But because again, I'm looking at this from like a what's going to happen. Well, how's the energy landscape actually going to change, right? Once you have a steady generation at a low place, but it's still 24/7 and it's
Yeah.
portable enough that right, because
Yeah.
it's the ability to bring these things and just put them somewhere anywhere
Yeah.
without having to run a million miles of copper that just
Right.
changes everything because it brings the time frame down
And I think
for
there's
deployment.
there's a lot of agreement with the idea that a small modular reactor is uh, the way to go. Whatever you want to use to drive that reactor, I mean, is it molten salt or some other technology? The ability to produce them in an assembly line at a single place where you have
Yeah.
all of your talent right there and you don't have to
Yes.
keep going and finding them, and then put it on a truck or a train and ship it wherever it needs to go. And then the states are doing the site licensing for the individual locations wherever the reactors go, but the NRC is doing the license of the design, and
Oh,
make sure that that's safe. And so
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of agreement that there's no way we're going to produce the amount of power that's going to be needed by building, Vogel 5 and 6, because those are going to
mhm.
take 20 years to build.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and the infrastructure to build them out is probably 35 years.
Yeah.
Right, to get to actually transport that power to somewhere
Submarine.
else. And of
Yeah.
course, in tech, the time frames are, 2 and 3 years before things become obsolete. And so they're used to going really fast.
So that's the question I have, Kim. I'm not sure if you know, but a good bit of energy is lost in transmission. So is there any research or any projects that are moving forward to try to improve the efficiency of the transmission of this energy? I mean, we start thinking about generating a lot more power. I mean, we can generate more, but if we could make it more efficient by transmitting it in a way that we're not losing so much of it, do you know of any research that's in that space?
Boy, that's really outside my field. I would just guess that with all of the money that you've accurately stated is involved in that process and the loss of that money that's involved in that. I feel like there are really smart people that are always looking for better ways to do that. But
Yeah.
one way to do that is to not do it,
Not do it.
to not transport it. So
Right.
generate
Use
the
it on
power where
site.
it's needed.
Hmm.
And
Right
so
when
that's
needed.
why did Stargate choose to build a 1.2 gigawatt data center just north of Abilene? Because this is where the power is.
Hmm.
They can get the natural gas right. I'm told that their facility is sitting on top of, I don't know, two or three already existing natural gas pipelines. Well, guess what they're using to power it? Natural
Right.
gas. They
Yeah.
don't hardly have to they don't have to transport the power. It's right there. That's why they built it there. And there's several more going up Haskell County to the north of us, one county, Shackelford County to the east of us, one. There's two more there. And again, why in Abilene, Texas, would you put a big data center? Well, because I can transfer the electrons, the information, that part I can transfer anywhere in the world in a split second.
With no
But
loss.
but
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
power, yeah, the power
Yeah.
is much more efficient to locate it here. Plus, land is cheap out here, right?
Right.
I can push over some mesquite trees, and I got plenty of space to put a data center.
All right. Let me do this. We're about 40 minutes into this. I'd like to wrap it up fairly quickly. But I want to shift over to um, VC Summer and the reactor startup program that they are going to, I guess, start 2026. I don't know how long that will take. The info, some of the product that was left at the old site is still there, and I think they've touted, meaning that the legislators and the some of the lobbyists have touted that they're going to be able to start that up fairly quickly. I mean, and I don't know what that means in terms of time because I don't think they've released all that information. But those are what I call older. They say that they they say, meaning Westinghouse says that these are new technology reactors, that they are still water cooled reactors. And I'm like, are they just trying to play it safe because they can maybe cookie cut these and they regulate them the same way? Or is it really old technology and that South Carolina is going to still be playing in a space that's 10 years behind everybody else, 20 years behind everybody else? I'm just I don't know anything about those reactors. I don't know much about reactors at all, but I do know that it seems like, what are your thoughts on, is this technology really viable, or do we need to really look at moving towards small modular reactors? You're not going to have it done in this project here in South Carolina, but maybe in other projects coming online, we can bring small modular reactors instead of for the whole gamut with bringing projects in and then the incumbent utilities company has to provide power for
Yeah.
them. So
I,
I'm just
I'll I- I'll start with this statement that I've heard Doug Doug Robinson, who's the CEO and founder of Natura Resources, say. He says nobody has to fail in order for us to succeed. And I think what he means by that is there's so much demand right now that there doesn't have to be one right way to do it. In fact, right now it's let's do every single way that we can, and we still probably aren't going to have enough power to satisfy the demand. So if you
Um,
were starting from scratch in a perfect world and you could wave your hand and have all the nuclear power that you want, well, maybe you might want to pick this technology or that technology or the other. But we're not, and we're in a real world, and we need power, and we need power right now, and wherever we can make it, and as fast as we can make it. And so, I think in that
okay.
particular case, it might make the most sense to
Yes.
use that
What you got?
technology.
Okay.
Look, conventional nuclear power is not bad. I mean, in a lot of ways, it does a lot of good things. It provides lots of power. It's safe. It's constant base load power. I mean, I think that molten salt. I'm biased, maybe, but I would say we can talk a lot about several ways where molten salt reactors can improve on the technology we've been using for several decades. One of them is the whole idea of the solid fuel and the limitation on how much of that fuel can actually be used.
Used, right.
Whereas in a liquid fueled reactor, you can basically use all of the fuel. And then you go from that to the waste that's generated. We could actually consume that waste in a molten salt reactor. Like anyway, I can go on and on
Yeah.
for that. But the point is, this is not a bad technology.
Okay.
Uh, I have a 2006 Ford F-150 pickup. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the rental car that I rode in last week, but it doesn't mean I have to throw it out. It still haul my goats just fine. I can still go get hay in it. There's a lot of good use, and I don't have to pay for the new reactor, which, the new car, which, maybe hadn't all been tested yet. So I think there's a role for lots and lots of good, safe nuclear power, even though it may not all be molten salt reactors yet
Right. And
today. But
emerging
eventually it
technology.
might.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna just finish up this thing, and one of the things that happened when they were building the one in South Carolina, their concept, Westinghouse concept is we're going to go to this factory, we're going to put the parts and pieces together, then we're going to truck them over and we're going to assemble them on site. And that got to be a fiasco. But then the NRC came in and said, well, we're worried about a jet airliner crashing into this reactor and what's going to happen. And so then, and you're going to have, I want you to address these. So that's why I'm telling you the story. The jet airliner was the first thing, and then they fixed that. They supposedly fixed that. Then they came back and said, well, now we're thinking about tornadoes and earthquakes. So then Westinghouse had to go back to the drawing board and fix that. And so it just created some issues. I see SMRs as a completely different target, so to speak, for jet airliners, for earthquakes, and for tornadoes because they're small, compact, and the whole thing. I'm thinking, a shipping container coming off a freight
Well, it
liner.
is something that I think our industry and the NRC in particular need to consider. You don't have to look very far to see where this could be a problem. Right now in Ukraine, Zaporizhia nuclear reactor is right in the middle of a war zone,
Mhm.
and I guess so far those parties have figured out a way not to blow it up, but and we maybe don't need to worry about a missile coming in, but we were asked the same thing. We're not too far off of the flight paths to our local airport. If an airplane crashes on our reactor, what happens? Well, we need to be able to convince the NRC that our reactor down in its hole, buried under concrete, is not going to be damaged and leak if an airplane crashes on top of it. And we're
Yeah.
right in the heart of Tornado Alley. And so, okay, now this one was actually kind of funny. So let me just draw you the picture of here's what I'm trying to show my hand and make sure
Yeah.
this is ground level. And so the reactor is down here 25 feet below ground, below grade. But then up above it, there's a 50-foot wall that's the concrete building. So the reviewer actually asked the question, what if there's a F5 tornado that puts lots and lots of force on the wall up here and causes the trench to actually come up out of the ground. Okay,
What?
it's 4 feet thick concrete walls and bottom all the way around. We had to stop ourselves from laughing, but yeah, we have to address those things. And really,
Okay.
it's not. They need to ask those questions, right? Because just in 2011, Fukushima,
Yeah.
somebody didn't ask the right question, which was, what if a huge earthquake happens out in the ocean and
Yeah.
that creates a huge tidal wave
Yeah.
and that swamps all of the generators that you built for backup power? Well, that's going to eventually lead to the leak that happened, and
There you
it was
go.
a chemical explosion, not a nuclear explosion, and the number of people that died from the evacuation far outnumbered the people. I think it was 1 or 2 people that actually died from radiation from that. The point is that was preventable. Somebody could have located that backup power higher up or protected it from wave or whatever. Natural disasters are not going to stop happening. We are going to have to deal with them at some point, hitting a nuclear reactor, and we'll all be judged, not just them. Us right here at ACU will
Yeah.
be judged by how well the next reactor survives a hit from a plane or a truck bomb or a tidal wave or whatever. We need to be able to convince the NRC and the public, my neighbors around here.
Oh yeah.
I need to be convinced that I can come to work in this office and be safe. Now, if a plane crashes into this building, it's not the reactor I'm worried about, it's the plane, right? That's what's going to give me a headache. But we all need to be
Yes.
convinced. And I look, one of the things that will derail this research for all of us, not just ACU, is the next horrible headline that happens because of nuclear power. Do you remember what happened to whatever momentum nuclear power had in 2011 when that Fukushima story happened? Germany took all of its reactors offline.
Yeah.
Japan stopped developing anything they had over there. That will be worse than any change in administration, any drop in the economy.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we
Yeah.
need to prevent. So I'm okay with the NRC asking the tough questions as
Mhm.
long as they're not a barrier to progress. They need to
Exactly.
keep us safe. Otherwise, the dollars stop
And,
flowing into this
and
industry.
and when you ask me, I want to know all the questions up front. I want to know, don't piecemeal me
Right?
the questions. But anyway,
Yeah.
all
We
right.
have a phrase
Listen.
for that. It's bring me a rock. And you bring a rock. Well, bring me a rock that's black. Okay,
Yeah,
well, here's a
yeah,
rock that's bring me a rock that's black and has speckles. Yeah, I get it. Bring me all of the requirements right now, and then I can answer
exactly.
them.
We
Yeah.
call that the DMV experience.
Oh, yes. You need this. You need that. Thank you so much.
You bet.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
let
Kim.
everybody get back to work, and this has been great. I will have a little recap of this from my AI, and I'll send it out, and I'll proof it a little bit first. But thank you so much, Kim. It's been great, and
Yeah.
I always think what you're doing there is just exciting, and we appreciate all y'all are doing. So
Thank you.
thank
Great
Thank
to
you.
you.
visit with you. Casey, nice to meet you. Good luck in all you're doing.
Appreciate it. Thanks, y'all. Have a
Thank
great
you,
day.
sir. Have a
Yeah.
great day and Thanksgiving.